You are listening to Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, a podcast released on the first 3 Wednesdays of the month. Family crisis, relationship crisis, addiction crisis, no two crisis situations are the same. They vary by family, individual, and relationship. They can encompass complex family dynamics, emotional distress, anger issues, and entitlements, and often involve substance abuse. This podcast addresses these issues and others surrounding the addiction epidemic currently plaguing this country and the world. There is hope and help.
Are you stuck, scared, or unsure of what to do next? If a situation with a loved one, spouse, or even a child has started to spiral, possibly becoming dangerous or threatening, it's time to seek help. My name is Scott H. Silverman. I help families navigate crisis situations. I'm the person you turn to in order to get you and your loved ones unstuck.
Welcome back to the show. This is Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, and I'm Michael Glenn Moore, Scott's co-host. Scott, what's going on today?
Well, today, Michael, we're going to say hello, and I've got a fun shirt on today. Normally, I wear a solid shirt. Today, I put a print on, and Michael and I were talking earlier, and he goes, "Well, you kind of look a little Hawaiian." I said, "No, what it is this is my shirt that goes with my elastic waist that go with, the COVID virus with a little bit of weight gain. I call it my big guy selection. I keep it over in a corner. So I wanted to put something on today that I can actually breathe while I talk." So anyway, so today we have a great guest coming up. But again, just want to welcome everybody here. The Scott H. Silverman Happy Hour with Michael Glenn Moore. And we just want to make sure you know that if you haven't heard something that we haven't talked about, or we have talked about, but we haven't gotten it right, let us know. Give us a call, text us, and you've got my phone number. I'll give it to you again, 619-993-2738. But let us know what's on your mind. I just did a big thing with an independent station here in the West Coast about homelessness, and gotten some interesting feedback and, a few rocks thrown through my window. But I welcome that kind of interaction with people and strangers. So let us know. What do you like? What do you want to talk about? What are we missing? Who should we be talking to? Because our guest today, I had to send out, some special people just to find her, because she's got such a unique story. And, and when you hire bounty hunters, they don't like to go out of state with COVID right now. So we had to go through, we set up some smoke signals, and we found her. So her name is Lisa Smith. And Lisa Smith is somebody that when I saw the title of her book, Girl Walks Out of a Bar, I was attracted to it. And then I realized it was New York, which is where I hit my bottom. And I thought, well, maybe we could be soulmates. So I reached out to her, and I think her email was something along the line, I think I'm launching my book. I'm in law. I'm really busy. Don't bother me. So I was really motivated when I heard that. Thought, okay, I went back to my roots in my first book, Tell Me No, I Dare You. So I kept pushing and pushing nicely. And she always responded. And we finally got a way to connect. And then I begged her to come on the Happy Hour and talk with us today. So you'll see from her shiny personality, nothing I've just said is true, but it just seemed appropriate to bring up. So I'm going to read a couple of things about Lisa. And then Lisa's going to tell us the actual truth about Lisa. So here she is. Lisa Smith is a speaker, recovery coach, podcast host, former practicing lawyer, and law firm executive. She's the author of the acclaimed memoir, Girl Walks Out of a Bar. Think about that one for a second. She'll tell us more about that. The book recounts her descent into recovery from a high-functioning alcohol and cocaine addiction in big New York City law firms. Named one of the New York Law Journal's 2020 Trailblazers, Lisa's story launched her to the forefront of the movement to advance well-being in the legal profession. She speaks frequently at law firms, law schools, bar associations, and other organizations on these issues. As a consultant, Lisa works with firms to structure and implement well-being initiatives that are both meaningful and practical for all stakeholders. She's also a coach, individual employee, administrative staff members seeking recovery. Lisa serves on the advisory board of Law.com's Mind Over Matters mental health reporting project. She also serves on the board of directors of the Lawyers Depression Project, which works to break the stigma around all the mental health disorders and to provide peer support. I'm going to go to the last paragraph. Prior to beginning her more than 20-year legal administration career, Lisa practiced law in the corporate finance group of leading international firms. She's a graduate of Northwestern University Rutgers School of Law, where she serves as an editorial board of the Rutgers Law Review. Now, but Lisa, before I let you kick it off, I want you to know something interesting that I learned here a couple of years ago, because I worked with first responders for a long time and a lot of lawyers, serving them, help them with their substance use disorder. So there was a conference here, I guess it was 4 years ago in San Diego. The National Bar Association was hosting it here, and there was a reporter in the crowd, and somebody from the podium announced the fact that currently, according to the American Bar Association, this is self-disclosed, approximately 35% of the lawyers in this country have an alcohol abuse problem. 35%. So it was in the paper 2 days later, and it got questioned because they said, "Where did you get that data?" And then the reporter said, "Well, I was sitting at their conference, and it might have been you there who was talking to him. I don't know." But that would, we know that law enforcement, first responders are north of 25%. And I never really had heard that there was a group that's higher than that. So to think about that for a second, and full disclosure, my daughter's a family law attorney, and I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic, and we've kind of kept an eye on her over the years. And she actually went to law school, Cardozo in New York. So anyway, we have some interesting connectivity. So Lisa, I'm going to shut up and ask you to tell us about Lisa.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you, and I'm sorry about the cat and mouse game for a while there. I'm glad to be here now. And yeah, that's interesting about, just to comment on that statistic, it is actually about 21% of practicing employed attorneys across the spectrum, but that 1/3, I think was closer to the number. So I think this must have been the number that was quoted. That's for lawyers in their first 10 years of practice. So they actually are suffering at the greatest rates of a profession that is also in general suffering as well. So it is, thank you for delving in. You gave a lot of the background on my story and who I am. I was always, through school, I always did well, and I was what you would consider, a big partier and like to drink. I considered it blowing off steam and a way to keep myself ready to, whether it was getting good grades or whatever it was. I thought it was a pretty healthy thing that I would shoot the lights out regularly. And it was when I became a first-year associate at a big law firm in New York that I became a nightly drinker. And from there, it was a 12-year downward spiral that I stopped actually practicing and switched over to the administrative side of the law firm in my 6th year of practice, when it was really the either getting more senior at a law firm or drinking alcohol the way I was had to go. And at that point, it definitely wasn't going to be the alcohol. So I switched over to an administrative side job, but I continued to do well the whole time. And finally, at the end of that 12-year run, it had degenerated from, I drink nightly to, years later, well, I found people who drink at lunch, so it's really okay to drink at lunch. People in France drink at lunch. There's really nothing wrong with that. To, the morning that I couldn't get out of bed and get to the office without having a drink to kill the hangover that I woke up with. And so the last 18 months of my using were, I had to drink just to sort of level set myself. But then I added in, instead of realizing maybe it was time to stop drinking and get some help, I thought the better idea at that time was to add some cocaine in to counter the effects of the alcohol so I could continue to function. And it all came to a crashing end one morning in 2004 when I was on my way to work. It was a Monday morning, and I thought I became overwhelmed with this feeling that I thought either I was having a heart attack or that I had finally OD'd. And I now know that it was a panic attack. But, for all of that miserable 12-year spiral and all the times I thought, my eyes would open and I would wish they hadn't, in that moment when I thought that, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to die right here in the hallway of my New York City apartment building, something snapped, and I said, I don't want to die here. I need to get help. So that was really, what really, when the study that those numbers come out of that we referred to, that study came out about 3 months before my book did, and that was in 2016, and it was fascinating because the progression and what you saw happening through the study, it was my story. So I was able to put kind of a face and a name and a human side onto what were some pretty, harsh numbers and kind of hard to think about in the abstract. But that led me to what I do now. Eventually I stayed in law firms until really August of 2019. My most recent role was as the deputy executive director of a firm in New York City. And now I have just, made the switch to doing what I do with law firms and the legal profession mostly, but sort of recovery more generally, into a full-time thing.
So, because we're going to talk a little bit about, not a little bit, a lot probably today about recovery. So what are the things that you do on a regular basis right now for your sobriety? Because if you don't mind sharing, what you kind of gave us that 12-year footprint, but after, what was it that triggered that Monday? Obviously, you look in the mirror and go, "Wow, I'm still alive. I'm going to do something about this." And most people who suffer from the maladaptive behavior will, they'll, after cocaine and alcohol, they'll go, "Well, maybe, some Xanax and fentanyl might help get me to Tuesday." So, I mean, that's the way I think. And I'm a retired unlicensed pharmacist. So I never wanted to give up my territory. And, methamphetamine was one of my drugs of choice, as being here in San Diego in a border town. But tell us a little bit about what the end was like and what the beginning was like, and then what it's like now for you in your recovery, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So that morning when I decided I needed to do something, and I was willing to do something, was the big thing. I'd known forever that I needed to do something. It was that morning that I became willing to do it. I had no sober references. I didn't have anyone in my family. My friends all were big partiers. There was no one I could sort of go to. I knew I was physically sick enough. Like, if you looked at me, you could see I had been able to work from home a ton, which is why, things hadn't been picked up on, and there's more to that. But I was physically very sick at the time, as you might imagine, after 18 months of that 24/7 cycle. And I knew that I would need a medicated detox. I knew that I couldn't just stop drinking or using, because that could lead to a spike in my blood pressure, possibly have a heart attack. So I knew I had to go to a hospital. So I called my doctor because I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I was not going to tell my law firm that I was, that I was seeking help for substance use disorder. And I knew that I could be out sick for 5 days from the firm without them being able to ask me any questions, or require doctor's notes. So I was willing to go somewhere for 5 days, and I wanted to keep it in Manhattan for some reason. My doctor went through, places that would take my insurance, and, I told him what was going on. And so we found a place that was in seemingly, it was in a good neighborhood I had lived in before. I was like, okay, that sounds like a good place. And they had a bed, and it was the only place that had a bed. So I was sad. And, the reason they had a bed was because it was literally the worst psych hospital and the worst detox, like in a lockdown psych unit in the city. And I had to sign in on a 72-hour psych hold when I went in. And, the bottom line of that story is, don't ask your gastroenterologist where to go to detox. But it was scary. And they gave me Librium, which, was the only way I could get through it. And I could have left and gone somewhere a little, a little cushier, but I was in place. I was on the Librium. I just said, leave me alone. Let me do this here. And I was diagnosed over the course of the days that I was in there. The psychiatrist came in, we talked for an hour each day. And at the end of the 5 days, they wanted me to go to a 30-day program somewhere, but I refused because of my law firm. And that is why I talk so much about stigma and breaking stigma, because it's not a good idea to do it that way. I want people to feel like they can go and they should go. But he said, really through my story, that he thought that I had been kind of going through life. I had started, the first substance I abused was food as a young kid. And I didn't know I was getting a dopamine kick from all the sugar I was inhaling. And then I switched to drugs and alcohol. But he said, basically, you've had an untreated, undiagnosed, underlying mental health disorder. He diagnosed me with major depressive disorder and anxiety, and put me immediately on antidepressants and said, hopefully this will help, adjust and correct your brain chemistry so that you aren't necessarily as compelled, but that's not going to be enough. You need to go. I agreed to go to an outpatient rehab at night after work 2 nights a week. And I also began right away going to 12-step meetings. And once I got into that, I had been carrying, like so many of us do, this secret and this shame and this, it's just me and I'm so alone in all of this. And as soon as the people in those rooms started talking, it just clicked with me like, oh, these are my people. I know you, you know me. And to this day, 17 years later, I can walk into any 12-step meeting and feel like I have more in common with the people who are there than almost anyone in my life. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, as we say. And so today, a lot of what I do is very similar. I am, I stay close to 12-step. I treat my brain the way I would treat any other organ in my body that had something going on, right? So I see a doctor who specializes in brains, like a cardiologist specializes in the heart. I see a psychiatrist. I take the medication that psychiatrist prescribes me as prescribed. And I do the lifestyle things that support my recovery and keep my mental health issues at bay, are good for them. So I try to eat well, I exercise, I meditate, I do a lot of connection. I work with others in recovery. And, it is still, I have never once said I will never drink again. That's just still too much. But I can, say each day when I get up, thank you for yesterday, and I'll take another day sober, and I'll do what I need to do to, put a sober head on the bed at the end of the day.
That's great. I like the way you logic size the format and the template in the portal of recovery, because I think it's a very, I don't want to say intellectual, but it's a common sense, makes sense way of framing it. And, because I do a lot of interventions, and when you hear family, oh, they don't want this, or they don't want that, or they don't believe in God, or, they don't really want to, and being Jewish, going into a Christian-based recovery program, my rabbi visited me in treatment, and he came to me and he said, Scott, Jewish people do not have drinking problems. And I said, Rabbi, I hear what you're saying, but I am in a lockdown facility. This is a secure place. There is security at the door. There's alarms on every window. I have a wrist ID that says, do not let exit property. And I said, I don't understand. He goes, well, God is within us and we don't have drinking problems. I said, let me tell you something. If God's within us, he is a party animal. Because I got to tell you, the last week I had in New York with my blackouts and what I've done over the last couple of years, he is a party animal, and he's relentless. So, anyway, so it turns out though, he really was angry with me, and my parents had him come visit me. This is back in '84. And, I won't tell you his name, but it's funny, he he had an issue about 8 years ago, I found out, and somebody tried to connect us, and it was an awkward moment. But anyway, it is what it is. But look, I look at this disease like I look at diabetes, and I think people should. And when you talk about, one of the biggest barriers is stigma. So thank you for talking about that. So how did your recovery change your relationships with your family and friends? Because it sounds like, and I was like you, I went into treatment Saturday morning. I didn't even know what AA was. I didn't even know what anonymous programs were. I didn't even know that abstinence was an option because I was just so sick in my own personal disease. And, wake up stuff, go to sleep stuff, get through the day stuff, weekend stuff, Monday to Friday, it's sunny stuff, it's cloudy stuff, weekday stuff, you're in trouble stuff you need when you're not in trouble. I was one of those kind of people. And so when I got to the rooms and I heard the messages, all they told me to do was shut up and listen, which to me was the best lesson I really got. So tell us, what's happened with your relationships and your family?
It's interesting because my family, there was also, not in my immediate family that I grew up with, but like in our extended family, there is a lot of substance use disorder and mental health challenges. Yet at the same time, it was like this, nobody understood. Everybody, people, I realized, I'd been hiding so much. And when I told them, there was a lot of, and I have a very tight group of friends as well, there was a lot of, that can't be right. You're not, yeah, you drink too much, but, you don't really look at you. You got a nice apartment. Your job is great. Like what could be wrong? And, to really, for them to really realize like they didn't know me the way they thought they knew me, was a big pill for them to swallow. But what I learned, and it kind of goes to the stigma point as well, is that all these people that I feared, if they found out, it would be the end of the world, and it would be, they would judge me so harshly, really were just, there was a lot of, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. I wish I knew earlier. How can, it's terrible you went through this. Now, how can we support you? But it was a lot of, learning for people like that. When I came home from the hospital, I was 38 years old at the time, but my parents came and my brother to get me, and I went and stayed at my parents' house in New Jersey for the weekend. And I remember, cocktail hour was a thing in my house. It just was. And I remember my dad being like, so are we drinking tonight? And they looked at me like, is it okay? And I was like, I didn't know anything. I said, well, I'm going to have to be around people who drink sometimes. So I guess so. So they all sat there and drank that night.
The name of the show, right? Happy Hour.
Yeah.
Because that's when I drank, was happy hour.
Yeah. That's what I grew up with was that, but not to the way, for me, happy hour ended up being, when I was practicing law, ended up being me standing in my underwear at 11 o'clock at night in front of my refrigerator, slamming down 2 beers, Right. And I'd be like, well, I'm just having cocktail hour. It's just, I'm home from work late.
Yeah, happy hour, I always thought was at the same time. There was a time of the day when everyone else kind of drank as much as I did for that hour. That's all I saw it as. To me, it was just another hour of the day, but others were like around doing the same thing because everything, buy drinks 2 for 1.
Right, right.
We do like deals, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it turned out, I was afraid I'd lose all my friends when I was no longer drinking. And it turned out that, my friends were right there for me. And so we didn't go out, I didn't see them in the bars on Friday night. I saw them on Saturday for lunch. Or, I had been living like a vampire in New York City. And, all of a sudden I was going to museums with my friends who weren't struggling with alcohol and could actually go to a museum on a Saturday. I discovered a whole new side of the world.
Well,
so the real friends stay with you.
Yeah, well, they say, you get rid of your playmates and play places and play things. And my wife pretty much took care of all my friends because all of them were at accelerated rates of all kinds of different things. So what was the most surprising thing in your recovery?
I think that was most surprising is I really expected to struggle when things got hard. that I would need to, like, what am I going to do when something really bad happens? I'm going to need to drink. How am I going to get through something really bad? And what I first realized that when I would get more triggered at the end of the work week, when I felt like I put in a good sober week at work, I have had another good sober week, I deserve a drink. Like, I found that was when I felt most like I had to be most careful around those times. And that at the times when stuff really hit the fan, when one of my best friends passed away, when I was helping my dad through his final weeks with pancreatic cancer and giving him morphine, in those times, I did not expect to not have any desire for a drink. I thought I would want to run away and hide from the hard stuff. But what recovery gave me that I never expected was just this ability to show up in a way that I never had before, and also to really derive meaning and purpose from being able to be there for someone else. Everything had always been about me, and really just that thread of being, a worker among workers and a friend among friends, and showing up in the moments that it's hard. When I thought I would want to drink, those weren't them. And, those are in fact some of the proudest things I've done, I would say, in recovery.
Okay, great. So tell me, what question have we not asked you today that we should?
Oh, let's see. I think I think one of the things to know now, that's less really about me and more about the next person, is that there are, and I'm sure you have thoughts on this too. When I got sober 17 years ago, it was 12-step or it was nothing. And now there are all kinds of other routes to, and ways to get to recovery. My own experience has been that with some of the women that I have met through various women's recovery groups that are not 12-step based or anything like that, that frequently getting into some other kind of group support, people are doing it, as on social media or in any other kind of venue, is a great place, I think, to start. There was never sort of that opportunity. I never saw it that way. There are a lot of people who come into recovery now who I see were like, I just don't do 12-step. I'm not going to do 12-step. And then after a while, just being in recovery, deciding that, I'm going to try 12-step and I'm going to do it. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that, I thought for a long time it was this or nothing. And now I strongly believe in 12-step. I could not have done it without 12-step, and I intend to stay. But other people may find other routes, and they may find those routes may lead them straight to 12-step as well.
Right. It's interesting. People always ask me about the steps and the God thing. And I love I said, people said, look, if you're troubled with the steps, come with me. We'll take the elevator. But let's just stop fighting something that is only suggested. And, one size does not fit all. I mean, I got into the treatment business 8 years ago here in San Diego because I got tired of going to funerals. And once you remove the anesthesia, which to me, the social model is one of the best, but the outcome studies don't necessarily giving any more flying colors than a 2-year program in Aruba. So, it's what you do after treatment that makes a difference. And if you've got underlying issues, and what I've learned is if you're on the planet and you can fog a mirror, you have underlying issues. And that's not to judge anybody. That's just reality. And for those of us who have been anesthetizing ourselves, our underlying issues are like volcanoes just waiting to erupt and pressure bust pipes. So what I want to do, though, is I'd like you to speak a little bit about your book. And then I want you to tell everybody how to get it, how to find you as much as you want to tell us. And you're in San Diego now, aren't you? Did I read that somewhere? Are you?
I am. I'm in Del Mar.
Ooh, Del Mar. So you still suffer from a little bit of grandiosity and terminal uniqueness. That's okay. That's okay. But I want us to follow up with each other because I run an outpatient program. I would love to get attorneys. And we, Confidential Recovery was about tailoring it to professionals. Because I remember once when I had a U.S. attorney, real quick story, comes in, I got a phone call from his boss, and where are they going to go? Where's somebody who's got a high profile position going to go? Well, that's what Confidential was open for. So he's supposed to meet me at 7. I get there at 7:30. He's asleep in his car. So I let him sleep for 4 hours. I mean, his job's pending, the bar's after him, his licensures, he walks in, he goes, have you been waiting long? I said, nah, 4 hours. Don't worry about it. Anyway, so I sent him to a place that I knew would motivate him. And it did. It was a lockdown facility. Again, I got a 72-hour hold without his permission through a relationship. They diagnosed him, and they know how to interview somebody. He didn't take assess. And he called me after 3 days. He goes, okay, I get it. You tell me what I need to do. I'll do it. I'll get it done and report back. It's okay. It's my style. I want to do what I can to help. So tell us about your book. Tell us how people can reach you. And then we're going to throw it over to Michael to ask you the best question of the interview today. And then we're going to give it back to you for the final word.
Great. So my book is really traces that story that I told you from the beginning of it goes back into my childhood and how it all progressed for me, because it really is one long line. And what I wanted to do in putting my name on it and not making it, fictionalizing it and not using a pen name, was I wanted to stand up and raise my hand and say, this is what it looks like. And this is what is possible as well. And it's really about, I also wanted it to be for somebody to read who maybe has someone in their life and doesn't understand how can this person be doing all these things. So I really tried to be in my head to help people understand what is going through the head of someone in that role. You can find me at Lisa Smith Advisory with an O.com. And the book is online. The book's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the Indies. It's wherever you get your books. And so I think you can also find me at Recovery Rocks podcast, which I do with a millennial. We have our little, and she, again, not a 12-step person. We talk about all the differences, and that is on Spotify and Apple and all the platforms.
Awesome. Michael, make us look good.
Well, I was going to ask her about her podcast, and she just talked about it. But what I'd like to know, Lisa, is when in your journey did you start your book and your podcast?
So I started the book. It's funny because I got, when I got out of the detox after 5 days, all of a sudden I was waking up sober in the morning and didn't know what to do with myself. And, my family and friends, as I mentioned, had no clue what was going on. So I started writing down, and the story in the detox was just really crazy what happened while I was there. And so I started writing that story in the morning because something told me I shouldn't let this go. I need to document this, whether it was, for someone else or for me. And I started finding writing therapeutic, and cathartic. So for 10 years before I'd go to work at a law firm, I wrote in the mornings, and then I got into workshops, and then submitted it for publication, and then it was actually published in 2016. So it was sort of my own piece of therapy that I never thought would see the light of day, which is why I wrote it like no one was going to read it. And then my podcast really came about because I had this friend in recovery. Well, she is sober, but not a 12-step person, and very different from me. She's 20 years younger than me. She is she's a writer, freelance writer. I was always in a professional corporate job. But we found so much in common on how we live our lives and how we treat the issues that come up in recovery. And we just, had a real rapport, and we decided it would make for a fun discussion, and the podcast kind of took off from there.
That's excellent. How many episodes do you have of the podcast so far?
We have done, it's funny because it's been in different kind of seasons, but there's, right now, the numbered ones are up to about 68, but I think there's well over 100 if you go back to the ones that were numbered prior to our switch.
Well, congratulations. You're past the 7-day hump. on, or the 7 podcasts. So I guess it's going to stay around.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and give us your quote of the day, and we'll end the show.
So my quote is a little bit obscure. It is from a movie called Candy, starring Heath Ledger and Abby Cornish, in which they're heroin addicts. And near the end of the movie, which is deeply disturbing and excellent at the same time, near the end of the movie, Heath Ledger's character Dan says to Abby Cornish's character, "If you're given a reprieve, it's good to remember just how thin it is."